for Economic Progress President Sean Tembo, who is also the spokesperson of the Tonse Alliance. Well, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Mr. Tembo, welcome to the hot seat.
Thank you, Crumbs, and of course, a very good morning to all the listeners and viewers out there.
Well, let's get straight into it, Mr. Tembo. How do you assess the current state of democracy in Zambia, considering the increasing arrests of opposition politicians and unlawful detention?
Well, Crumbs, I think it is very clear to everybody, to every reasonable Zambian, that there is a total breakdown in the rule of law in this country. And we are essentially a failed state now as things stand, because there's very selective application of justice. And justice is something that holds any society together. When I commit an offense and you commit an offense, a similar offense, the expectation of society is that we are going to be equally treated. So when you have a situation whereby others perpetuate hate speech and they go scot-free, the way the UPND Secretary General referred to the Bishop of Lusaka as Lucifer, and then others commit alleged hate speech and they want to incarcerate them for between 7 and 20 years, then that is total selective application of justice. So it is very regrettable, but my hope and wish is that at some point...
well, that's not in the law. It's just being proposed right now, isn't it?
Yes.
7 to 20 years.
Yes. It is being proposed.
So we can't refer to a law that hasn't been passed.
Of course, but we have had incidents whereby, for instance, Honorable Chimbagambiri was convicted of hate speech on very flimsy grounds. And then the DPP is appealing against that 6 months sentence. He wants 2 years. You understand? On the other hand, the same DPP refused the private prosecution of Honorable Emenda, the UPND Secretary General. I pursued the private prosecution myself. I took Emenda to the magistrate's court. I filed charges of hate speech against him, and the DPP refused to give consent. So that is a very clear case of selective justice.
What reasons were you given?
There were no reasons given. And that is not an isolated case, Combs. Similarly, the Minister of Education, Honorable Douglas Yakarima, referred to the people of Wapula province as having a poverty of the mind. And you are making ridicule of people of a certain location in our country. And similarly, I took that case to the magistrate's court. I filed criminal charges of hate speech against Honorable Douglas Yakarima. And similarly, just like in the first case, the DPP, Gilbert Piri, refused to give consent. Whereas anyone who says anything about people from the southern area of the country, the western area of the country, they are quickly prosecuted. We've got a person called Waimi. Up to now, he is in prison. We have that taxi driver. He's in prison. So if we are going to have laws about hate speech, let us apply them across the board in a fair and equitable manner. When we do that, then we are going to begin to build a just and fair society.
You feel that law is being misused?
Definitely. And any reasonable Zambian can see for themselves. It is not something that would be subject to debate or subject to argument. No. It is written on the wall. There is clear, selective justice. People from the eastern and northern part of this country are being persecuted for offenses which people from other regions of the country are let to go scot-free. And that is on record.
Then also one would say, are opposition leaders deliberately just poking the bear? Find certain statements that are put forward that are borderline insulting, and then when the law comes after them, they cry foul. Why is that? I mean, right now we have the case of Madame Imboela, who luckily for her won't find herself locked up. She has a fine that she has to pay by the 25th of November because of statements she put out there. Should opposition leaders be careful with or find more civil ways to put forth checks and balances?
Yeah,
do you think that's a fair point?
Of course. But if you are going to apply certain standards to the opposition, then those same standards should be applied to the ruling party. So instead of you asking me that question to say the opposition should be using civil language, your question should be politicians across the board, whether ruling party or opposition, should use civil language. You know? So I shouldn't be imposed with standards as an opposition leader which are not applicable on the ruling party.
Because you're an opposition leader. Yes, so on your end, I'd like to speak for the fraternity that you come from. That's why I address the opposition.
Yes, but my point is that if we are going to prescribe certain standards for political players, those standards should apply across the board, regardless of whether you are opposition or you are ruling party. You cannot have a situation whereby if Sean Tembo says a statement because he's an opposition leader, that statement is hate speech. If Emenda, the UPND SG, says a statement, similar statement, then it is not hate speech. Those are double standards that we're talking about, Crumbs.
Double standards, for sure, should not exist on a political playing field.
Indeed.
But when it comes to the checks and balances that you put forth as the opposition, should you be more civil? Put the story of people in power now aside. Let's talk about the opposition.
You are missing the point.
Your checks and balances.
You are missing the point, Crumbs. If we are going to have a civil discourse as political leaders, it should apply across the board. It shouldn't just be an issue of the opposition. It's not a
retaliation from the opposition.
It's not a retaliation.
Because of how the ruling party are conducting themselves.
It's not a retaliation. My point is that if you are going to prescribe certain standards of discourse to the opposition, those standards should apply across the board to the ruling party as well. You have people, as a matter of fact, in my view, the opposition are more civil in their discourse than the ruling party. Very civil. I can give you a whole list of cases of the ruling party officials where they've used very uncouth language towards the opposition. For instance, the Copper Belt minister, and this is a government official, not just a politician, he's a government official, referred to the opposition as a bunch of hyenas. Since when did an opposition leader refer to the UPND, the ruling UPND, as a bunch of hyenas? Never. You understand? So, on any given day of the week, the ruling party are more uncouth. They are more uncivilized in their discourse towards the opposition. We are very civilized. On any given day of the week, Crumbs, most of the time we are arrested because we are being persecuted, not because we've broken any law.
You're saying the opposition have been civilized?
Yes, to a large extent. I can't speak to, on behalf of each and every opposition leader, but to a large extent, when you put the two on a scale, the scale tilts towards the ruling party in terms of using uncouth language.
There's been mudslinging from both ends. So it's quite shocking to hear you say that the opposition have been civilized when we've heard so many unpalatables being thrown on both ends. And this is a holistic picture.
That's your view, Crumbs. I respect your opinion, but I don't agree with it. Yeah. Can we move on to something more progressive now?
I'd like to know, what role do you think the opposition should play in promoting democratic governance and holding those in power? And by the way, I'm in control of the interview. I will steer us in the direction.
Yeah, of course. I'm not trying to get your job. I'm not trying to get your job, Crumbs. Yeah. I'm happy as an opposition leader, and I'm happy with my job as a Tonse Around spokesperson. Yeah. So don't worry about me trying to steal your job. Not at all.
I'm not worried about it.
Yeah. What was your question again?
My question is, what role do you think the opposition should play in promoting democratic governance and holding those in power?
It is the role that we've always played. I've always taught people to say my view about the role of an opposition in the context of Zambia's constitutional democracy, which, by the way, is deteriorating towards a banana republic now since the ascendance of President Hakainde Hichilema. I believe that the role of opposition is twofold, basically. On one hand, our job is to hold the government of the day accountable in terms of the way they spend public resources. So when you have a situation, for instance, where a company is incorporated today and the following day the company is awarded a 31 million kwacha tender by the Food Reserve Agency, the way it was reported in the Auditor General's report, it is our job and responsibility to take that up and hold the government accountable. Similarly, when you have reports such as what was reported in the 2023 Financial Intelligence Center Trends Report, where it was reported that about $3 billion was externalized out of the country, was illegally externalized out of this country. It is our job to hold the government accountable and say, President Hakainde Hichilema, where did you take that $3 billion? Who did you pay that money to? And why was it taken through illegal channels to the extent that it was flagged by the Financial Intelligence Center. So that is one aspect of our responsibility as an opposition. The other aspect of our responsibility, of course, is to provide alternative solutions to the national challenges, challenges facing the nation. It is not enough for us to complain about the incompetence of the current government. It is not enough for us to complain about what the current government is doing wrong. We have a duty and responsibility to step forward and offer alternative solutions. And speaking for ourselves as Patriots for Economic Progress, I must mention, Crumbs, that we have been very consistent in providing alternative solutions to national problems. And we do that in the form of alternative national budgets. We have done that consistently for the past 7 years. I'm sure you are aware of that. And we are yet to unveil our 2025 alternative budget during the course of this month. Sorry?
Why is this one taking so long?
No. This is the time that we normally unveil our alternative budgets. November, December, sometimes October. But it depends on when the government releases their official budget, because ours is an alternative, and it has to come after government has released their official national budget.
Give us some previews. What are some of the items in your alternative budget?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that opportunity, Trump. So, when you look at the 2025 official national budget that the Honorable Minister of Finance unveiled about a month ago, you will note a few things that are screaming at you in that budget. One of the things is the issue of the proportion of the budget which is funded by borrowing. You are talking about 40-something percent. That's a huge portion of the budget which is funded by borrowing. And most of that borrowing is domestic borrowing. And already for us, we have a problem with the extent and the rate at which government has been borrowing in terms of domestic borrowing, because they inherited a total domestic debt of about 78 billion kwacha when they ascended to office on the 26th of August of 2021. And as we speak today, our domestic debt is standing at 232 billion kwacha. That's an increment of more than 160 billion kwacha over a period of 3 years. And to us, to see a budget for 2025 where the government is indicating in the budget that they are going to continue borrowing, chances are that we are going to close 2025 with domestic debt of more than 300 billion kwacha. So we have a problem with that.
That's the second issue. Budget through tax collection.
Sorry?
They're trying to raise revenue locally, domestically, rather than going out there to borrow. That's what they've come out to say with this budget.
No, that is not what domestic debt is about, Trump. Can you allow me to explain to you what domestic debt is?
What is domestic debt then?
Okay. So domestic debt is debt which government contracts using an agent called the central bank, in this case, the Bank of Zambia. So they issue treasury bills and they issue government bonds, and then they borrow from the market and use that money to fund the budget. Now, domestic debt has a very big problem when you compare it with other forms of debt, such as foreign debt, because domestic debt, you are literally wiping out liquidity from the local domestic economy by one player who is the government. Because the people who buy treasury bills, as well as government bonds, are usually these institutional investors like the commercial banks and, insurance companies, pension funds, and so on and so forth. So by government taking away that money from the economy, you find that these commercial banks, for instance, will not have money to lend to the private sector. And if you are going to develop an economy, you need it to be private sector driven. The private sector are the ones who are supposed to drive economic growth. And if they don't have capital, the way we have no access to reasonably priced capital, then the private sector becomes very stagnant. It becomes suffocated. So that is the biggest problem with the issue of domestic debt. And when we form government, not if, but when we form government under the Tonse Alliance, and if I have an opportunity to serve as this country's finance minister, one of my first orders of business will be to trim down significantly on domestic debt. My objective will be to liquidate at least 90% of the domestic debt within, the first term.
How are you going to do that?
So the approach is simple. The question you should ask yourself is, why are we borrowing so much to finance the budget? It is because we are not collecting enough in terms of tax revenue. And why are we not collecting enough in terms of tax revenue? It is because the New Dawn government has given huge tax holidays to the mining sector. And we all know that the mining sector is the biggest contributor to tax revenue in this country.
But
so let me just finish.
Collecting taxes from mines has always been a problem.
Let me finish first.
I'm just chipping in because you're talking about mining, and I can throw in something into your scorecard.
Let me finish on the tax revenue from the mines. You come in with a follow-up question. Let's not do a Costa here again.
This is not Costa's show. This is the hot.
Of course.
Yeah.
So I was saying that the reason why government is relying so much on domestic borrowing is because they are not collecting enough tax revenue. And the reason they are not collecting enough tax revenue is because they've given huge tax holidays to the mines. If you look at the 2022 official budget, specifically on page 7, you will see that the Minister of Finance clearly indicated that he has extended tax holidays to the mines and that the potential loss in tax revenue from those measures of the tax holiday amounts to about $3 billion. You understand? Now, $3 billion crumbs is a lot of money in the context of our economy here in Zambia. And if you give a tax break to the mines worth $3 billion, essentially you will not have any money. And the statistics are there. If you go to the Bank of Zambia website, I prefer Bank of Zambia than these other institutions. I think the information from Bank of Zambia is reasonably reliable. So when you go to the Bank of Zambia website, you can see the trend in terms of specifically mineral royalty tax. Under the previous regime by the Patriotic Front, we were collecting an average of about 200 million per quarter in mineral royalty tax. You go to the Bank of Zambia website now, you'll find that we are collecting an average of about $30 to $40 million per quarter. So that's a huge drop. That's a very, very big drop. And all that is arising from the fact that government, as its first order of business when they were sworn into office, decided to give huge tax holidays to the mines. And, crumbs, when you look around, you find that most of the people who invest in the mining sector in our country are foreigners. These are companies which are big. They are traded on the London Stock Exchange, on the New York Stock Exchange. They are big companies. They've got all the money.
How will you collect more
got all the money.
From the mines?
So the question is, why give a tax holiday to this big multinational corporation, and then you want to tax a marketeer? You want to tax a person who owns a Kama house in Karingaringa at the rent you've collected, 500 kwacha, you're a bomb. But you don't want to tax a multinational. Where is the reasoning in that?
You've talked about the tax holidays. I want to know what your solutions are. How will you collect more revenue from the mines, which has been a problem for a long time?
The first order of business, my government will cancel those tax holidays so that the mines can begin to pay their fair share of tax. That would be the first step. Simple step. Cancel the tax holidays. Then,
but even before those tax holidays were there, revenue collection has been a problem with the mines. So what are you going to do differently?
Revenue collection has been a problem, I agree with the mines, but we were able to collect reasonably adequate revenue under the previous administration. That is why. Yes, reasonably adequate. I'm not saying that is the optimal we could have collected, but it was reasonably accurate. But then the New Dawn came and introduced tax holidays. So our reasonably adequate revenue from the mining sector dropped to a very minimal amount.
I want to know what your solutions are.
So I told you the first order. Yeah, but you need to allow me to explain. I was explaining to you the first order of business would be to cancel the tax holidays. I was going to come to the second order of business, but then you interrupted me. So if you want me to explain, you need to give me time to explain.
This is a conversation. It's not an interruption.
Of course.
You shouldn't look at it as an interruption.
Okay, sure.
It's a flow of a conversation.
Yes.
So let's have a conversation.
Do you want me to explain to you the second measure we're going to say?
Give us the second measure. Because cancelling tax holidays is not enough. We've had moments where there were no tax holidays and still revenue collection, we're not getting enough from the mines. So I want to know what you're going to do differently.
No, when you look at the loss in revenue that arose from the tax holidays, you realize that it is a significant amount. $3 billion from on any day of the week is a very big amount of money. So you can't say cancelling tax holidays is not enough.
No,
it is a lot of money, but there are other measures.
Would you like me to ask my question again so that you get what I'm asking?
Yeah, sure.
You're saying when you get into power, if you get into power.
When we get into power.
I'll say if, because we're not sure. If you get into power, or you cancel the tax holidays.
Yes.
But what I'm saying is when we go, as a first measure. When we go back into history, seeing that even when there were no tax holidays, collecting revenue from mines was a problem. So that's why I want to know what you do different.
Can you give me an opportunity to just explain to you our overall reforms, proposed reforms for the mining sector?
Sure.
Would that help?
Sure.
Okay. Because, tax revenue is just one fraction, one issue. There are other underlying issues in the mining sector which my government will address once we are sworn into office. So when you look at the mining sector, one of the reasons why collection of tax revenue has been a challenge is the fact that there is a lot of false accounting going on in the mining sector. That happens both on the revenue side as well as on the cost side. Remember, when you talk about tax, income tax is levied on the profits, the taxable profits, isn't it? And the key variables that influence how much taxable profit you're going to have as a company is your revenue and your costs, isn't it? So the mines have been systematically under declaring their revenue. You understand? The way they've been doing that is that when they sell the copper, company A does the mining, they get the copper. When they are selling the copper, they don't sell the copper on the world market. You understand? They sell the copper to a subsidiary of the same company, and they sell it at a lower price than the price obtaining on the world market. So when you go to the London Metal Exchange, you'll find that maybe a metric ton of copper is $10,000. You understand? But they will sell to this company B, which is their subsidiary, at maybe $6,500 or $7,000 per metric ton. So they are reducing their revenue. That is one side of it. The second side is that when they are buying equipment, they will not go and buy equipment on the open market. Okay. On the open market, maybe a Caterpillar would be maybe $2 million. But then they buy this Caterpillar through a subsidiary of theirs. So this subsidiary is the one buying the Caterpillar from the manufacturer's Caterpillar. So they'll buy the Caterpillar, instead of $2 million, they'll get it maybe at $4 million. Meanwhile, this subsidiary got it at $2 million. You understand? So they are blowing up their costs and reducing their revenue. At the end of the day, when they do their financial statements and they declare their taxable revenue, you find that it is very minimal. And most of the time, it is in a loss position. And you can't levy income tax if you have a taxable loss. So that is how they've been under declaring their taxable profits. And when I, should I have the privilege to serve as a Minister of Finance under the Tonse administration, I'll make sure that those loopholes are addressed. You might ask me to say, why have they not been addressed? Why have those loopholes not been addressed?
Because
the reasons are two.
The authorities know them.
Well, I don't know if they know them. Given the level of incompetence of the UPND administration, I don't think they would know them. But even if they did, they have a high appetite to appease foreign investors, so they wouldn't have the appetite to do anything about it.
How do you close those loopholes?
So it's twofold. Number one, you need to have a specialized, a very specialized, tax audit office under the Zambia Revenue Authority. The challenge we have with the Zambia Revenue Authority is that most of the people are on contract. And when those contracts, usually 3-year contracts, when those contracts come up for renewal, most of those contracts are not renewed. So you have a very high turnover of staff. We don't have a strong database of competence. You understand? So you need to have a specialized office where you've got experts who are retained on a very long-term basis, who can have the institutional memory of the organization, who can be able to address the challenges in terms of mining, in terms of taxing the mining sector. So that will be one of our reforms. We, in fact, my view is that people who serve in these very critical institutions like ZRA, they should not serve on contract, because the level of loyalty of someone who is serving on a contract is very limited, especially when their contract is nearing to an end and they are not sure whether it is going to be renewed. Can you imagine the quality of decision that a person working in ZRA would make today, knowing that tomorrow is their last day in office? So people in sensitive institutions is similar to people in the security wings, people in the defense wings. I don't believe they should serve on contract. They should be on permanent and pensionable, so that their loyalty to their organization is unquestionable on any day of the week.
Let's switch to this. The Tonse Alliance recently endorsed former President Edgar Lungu as its 2026 candidate. How did you arrive at this decision?
He was the best candidate for us in terms of his competence, his track record, and his potential to win us the 2026, presidential election. He was the best candidate. There was no question about it. So it wasn't a very difficult decision to make, Crumbs, I must admit. It was a very easy decision to make because he was outstanding.
A man who lost elections by a huge margin in 2021 is the best candidate.
You mean the way Donald Trump lost the elections in 2020 and then won with a landslide in 2024?
Two different countries, two different situations.
Of course.
Why would you use that as an example?
Yeah, because my point is that if people don't vote for you in a particular election, it doesn't mean that they can never vote for you. Similarly, Dr. Edgar Chagwa lost the 2021 general election, but we have no doubt in our minds that he's going to win with a landslide come 2026. And he will be the 8th president of the Republic of Zambia. We have no doubt in our minds whatsoever.
This is a man whose mental state you questioned back in 2019 because of that purchasing of that $400 million Gulfstream jet. And this is the same person that you believe can lead the country again in 2026. Well, you actually got arrested for that.
Well, times change, Crumbs. Times change. The things that you believe. What changed? What changed is the quality of governance that we have been subjected to under Dr. Hakainde Hichilema, the current president. I'll tell you something, Crumbs. When President Lungu was president, we thought that this country could do better. We thought that the infrastructure that he was putting up, we could put up even better infrastructure. We thought that the exchange rate, which was at 17 kwacha, could be better. It could be at 8 kwacha or 5 kwacha. We thought that the petrol we were buying at 16 kwacha could be maybe 9 kwacha or 10 kwacha. You understand? And then we removed him and we ushered in Mr. Hakainde Hichilema. And Mr. Hakainde Hichilema's leadership has been pathetic. It has been a total disaster. And then we realized to say, actually, what we had was far much better than what we were given in the form of Mr. Hakainde Hichilema. That is why on any
president buying a $400 million jet when the country's economy was in the doldrums is a man who you would say is better.
By the way, Crumbs, on that, let me give you some insight on that so-called $400 million Gulfstream. If you have been following the proceedings, because that matter is in court, I'm sure you're aware it's in court, right? If you have been following the proceedings of that matter, you realize that in terms of the testimony of both the state as well as the defense, it is common knowledge that that $400 million was not for the Gulfstream alone. There was certain chunks which were for security installations. There were certain chunks which were for various other purposes. So let me finish. That is according to what is on record before the courts, based on the testimony
does that make it
of
any
various.
better?
Yes, because we were misled as a nation to believe that the 400 million is the price of the Gulfstream, which it wasn't. The price of the Gulfstream in that breakdown was only about $70 million. The rest of the money was for various types of security installations across the country for the well-being of the nation.
It's still $400 million US dollars.
Sorry?
It's still $400 million US
Yes,
dollars.
but we need security installations for our defense and security as a nation. You understand? Unless you are telling me that we should not have security installations which would prevent, detect terrorism or this and that. We need that. So the fact that the amount spent on the private jet was only about 70 million, to me, that is a reasonable expenditure. If you remember, because I'm one of the people who argued against the purchase of a Gulfstream, I was very vocal about it. If you remember one of the examples I gave the example to say, why could government buy a Gulfstream at 400 million when other countries, around that same time, the president of Botswana, Mr. Masisi, bought an ATR-72 aircraft to use as a private, as a presidential jet. And he spent about $75 million for that. So I was doing a comparison to say, Why spend $400 million when we have a neighbor who also bought a presidential jet, but at $75 million? That was my biggest argument. But now, with the revelation that that $400 million was just UPND propaganda, that the actual amount spent on the Gulf Stream was only $70 million, I mean, to me, $70 million is reasonable. It is within my expectations. You understand? So that is what has changed. A lot of truth has been revealed from what was predominantly UPND propaganda.
February 13th, 2020, police shot and wounded 2 protesters and shot and killed a boy aged 14 during a peaceful demonstration against police violence and use of excessive force. All this happened under former President Edgar Lungu.
When was that?
This was 2020, February 13th. You don't remember this?
During the time that HH in opposition was someone that posted photos, and then there were UPND cadres who accompanied him.
So many examples.
No, I'm asking you that particular case. I'm asking you about that particular case. So you've raised that particular case. I want us to deal with that particular case. I don't want us to talk in general terms because we're not going to be able to have an agreement. So you are talking that case. You are talking about that case where those people were shot who were protesting by a police officer. Case. That's the one for the 13th. So I'll tell you something about that case, Combs. I know you are trying to dodge me, but you're not dodging me.
I'm just telling you that's
trying to dodge me, but you're not dodging me.
That's a different case.
You are trying to dodge me. I'll give you.
And there are plenty more examples that I can give.
That's fine. But we'll deal with this one now. Okay, we'll deal with this one now. You've raised that one. Let's deal with it. Then you can raise many other ones that you have in your mind. That's not a problem. That particular case, Combs. Yes, I agree. There were those 2 people who were shot. Okay, there were those 2 people who were shot by a police officer. But you know what is different between the kind of police violence that took place during the leadership of Dr. Edgar Chagwa and the kind of police violence that is taking place now under the leadership of Mr. Hakainde Hichilema. You know what is different? What is different is the fact that under Dr. Edgar Chagwa, any police violence that took place, the police officer or officers responsible were held accountable. In that particular case you are referring to, that police officer was charged and they are appearing in court right now. As we speak, under the current administration of Hakainde Hichilema, we had an incident whereby the Archbishop of Lusaka, Dr. Arik Banda, was... Let me finish, Clumsy. Let's not have a fight. Let's not have a fight. I'm giving you...
I'm running this interview.
Yes, but I'm explaining. You asked me a question, I'm explaining.
Something that's not true.
You follow it up. You follow it up at the right time. You follow it up at the right time. You follow it up at the right time. Let me finish.
Do you want me to run?
Let me finish. You asked me a question. Let me finish explaining. You can't stop. You can't stop me from explaining simply because you don't like the explanation. You understand? You can't stop me from explaining simply because you don't like the explanation. Allow me to explain. You ask me a question, let me explain.
We're having a
Then you can ask a follow-up question.
Do you recognize
you ask me a question, allow me to finish explaining. Then you can ask a follow-up question.
Mr. Tembo, it seems you don't understand what the conversation is.
You can't stop me from explaining simply because you don't like my explanation.
You say...
You ask me a question.
Listen, the reason why
a question.
Have I interrupted you a lot in this conversation?
No. Let me finish explaining. Let me finish explaining.
Have I stopped you?
You asked me a question. Let me finish explaining.
This conversation has gone very well.
Let me finish explaining.
Let me just throw this into the conversation.
You asked me a question. If you want to ask a follow-up question, you can do it later.
In 2020, February 13th, after that incident,
you asked me a question.
The police spokesperson,
you asked me a question. Let me finish explaining.
That no police officer will be charged because the killing of the boy was not a mistake.
If you have a follow-up question,
it was said that was a mistake. It was because
if you have a follow-up question,
something that you spoke
if you have a follow-up question, ask it after I'm done. You understand? It's simple. Let's have a civilized interview here.
Is it civilized?
Yes, you ask me a question. Let me finish explaining.
No, but you can also understand.
Then you can ask a follow-up question later.
Mr. Tembo,
you ask me a question. Let me finish explaining.
Let me
you can't set me up because you don't like my explanation.
Mr. Tembo, let me finish. Let me, as the interviewer, respect me.
No, I'm the guest. You called me. You called me here. You called me here.
And the reason why,
you called me here.
I saw what you did on the TV.
No,
and this is not what's going to happen.
No.
This is not what's going to happen.
No. That's not the way to proceed.
When a conversation
is happening, you asked me a question.
Do you understand how a conversation
You asked me a question.
When you're asked a question,
you asked me a question and I'm explaining.
Let me finish.
Okay, so allow me to finish my thought.
You said something.
Allow
and
me
then
to
I wanted
finish my
to
thought.
chime in because you
Allow
said
me to finish
something
my
that
thought.
wasn't true.
Allow me to finish my thought.
You said
As simple
something
as
that
that.
wasn't true.
Allow me to finish my thought.
Please go ahead,
Yes,
Mr. Tembo.
yes,
But
yes.
this will not be allowed
No.
going forward.
When you ask me a question, allow me to explain. You can't ask
You
me
are
a
being
question.
allowed to have
You
to
can't ask
explain
me a
yourself.
question and then you cut me when I'm trying to
I'm
explain.
cutting you.
You're cutting me.
Part of a
You're cutting
conversation
me.
is to embellish a
You
point.
ask me a question and then you allow me to explain. Simple.
Please finish your point because this is noise.
Thank you. Yes. So I was drawing a parallel to say when you look at the police violence that took place under the leadership of President Edgar Chagwa and you compare it with the police violence that is taking place under the leadership of Dr. Hakainde Hichilema, you realize that the police who misbehaved under the leadership of Dr. Lungu were held accountable. Specifically, that case you've cited, that police officer is appearing in court. He was charged for that conduct. Now you have this situation where a few weeks ago, police officers went to the Cathedral of the Child Jesus there. They prevented the Archbishop of Lusaka, Dr. Eric Banda, from accessing his own premises because he wanted to hold a memorial for the late President Michael Sata. And they manhandled the bishop. I was there myself. They held him in his clothes, preventing him from entering the gate. That is assault. On any day of the week, that is assault. And those officers have not been held accountable. Not at all. You have officers who came and abducted me at my house and took me to Bomoro, took me in the bush and tortured me. Up to now, those officers have not been held accountable. So, officers who misbehaved under Dr. Edgar Chagwa were held accountable. If someone misbehaved at that time, they were arrested and prosecuted.
Charges?
Yes.
Have you filed charges against the police officers?
I don't need to file charges. The incidents are clearly in the public domain. I'll file the complaint. Yes.
If you were tortured,
I'll file the complaint. I haven't filed charges, but I'll file the complaint. And the police are supposed to respond and act on that complaint.
So the point I was trying to make when you rudely interrupted me.
I didn't rudely interrupt you.
On the 13th, now you're interrupting me. Now you're interrupting me. Now you're interrupting me, Mr. Tembo. So going back to the incident, this is a civil. Listen, Mr. Tembo, all I was trying to tell you is when you're speaking and there's something that I can throw in there, I'm allowed to.
Yes, you can.
I'm allowed to do that. So you can ask it later. Allow me to do my job.
You can ask a follow-up question later.
Kindly asking you, Mr. Tembo, to allow me to do
that. Yeah, sure.
Because we have listeners and they're not interested in you and I going back and
forth. Go ahead.
On semantics.
They are not interested in you interrupting me as well.
They're not interested in you interrupting me because there is a point I was trying to raise. On the 13th of February 2020, the same incident that I referred to, the police spokesperson came out and said that no police officer would be charged because the killing of the boy was by mistake. That was the statement that came out. That's what I was trying to tell you. So that you could comment on that, but you just completely shut me up. But anyway, we'll leave that story. On the 27th of September, a police officer shot and killed Timothy Zulu of Kamanga. He was 17 as he fled police enforcement of COVID-19 pandemic curfew restrictions at a Lusaka nightclub. That was excessive force that was used. The police were criticized.
I think the right person to answer those specific detailed police questions would be the former Inspector General of Police.
Because you're making
clearly, yes. But
you're making comparison.
Yes,
if you're able to make a comparison, then
there are certain cases which were very much in the public domain, which I followed, like the one where that person, those two people lost their lives when HH was summoned to force headquarters. I remember that one because it was in the public domain. So I can comment on it. Those other detailed ones you are talking about, I never used to work for the police during that time. I'm not a spokesperson for the police. I'm not the former IG of police. So you can reserve those questions for, what was the name of that former IG? What is the name of that gentleman? Huh? Kanganja. Yes. Reserve some of those detailed questions for Kanganja because I'm not
about the conduct of the police during the patriotic.
You know what? If it is in the public domain.
Let me finish my question. You're interrupting me already before I finish the question. If you're going to play those rules,
those cases we are talking about, I don't even know they existed. I don't know whether you concocted them in your head. I didn't know.
Why would I concoct something?
I don't know.
Why would I disrespect?
I don't know because I don't remember them. That's why I'm telling you to say, can you restrict yourself
just because you don't remember
cases which were in the public domain? Restrict yourself to cases which are in the public domain.
These were issues that were in the public domain.
Well,
just say you didn't know.
I never came across.
You can just say you didn't know.
I never came across it. Yes, I never came across it.
You don't have to.
So those detailed ones, you can reserve them for Kanganja. I'm sure you can.
That's fine. If you don't want to comment on it, we can move on. Yeah. But also, we can talk about, opposition leaders being locked up during the Patriotic Front for longer than they were supposed to. Same thing happening now. What happened back then isn't right now. So where is this breakdown? Where does this come from that we keep on seeing the same script when they're different people?
On that same one, Crumbs. On that same one, I was one of the people who were arrested under the PF administration. I was arrested, I think, on 3 different occasions. And I can assure you that the longest I stayed in police cells was, I think, at Central Police. I spent 3 days there. And then if you draw a parallel between what happened then and what is happening now, you can clearly see that these incidents of prolonged incarceration are happening now. You talk about the Gen Z protesters. They were incarcerated for more than 2 weeks, more than 14 days. You talk about journalist Thomas Ziambo. He was, held without bond and without bail for about 17 days. You remember the time we went to protest at Parliament against the budget, on the day of presentation of the budget.
Right.
Myself and various other civil society leaders, Laura Miti, Pirato, Mr. Mwape, and so on and so forth. We were 6 of us. We were arrested at Parliament. That was 2017. And we were taken to Emersdale police station. And we were taken there around 17 hours. By midnight, we were released in our own cognizance. You understand? Why? Because we were merely doing our job of holding the government accountable. We were not violent. We merely held placards. Now, if you want to draw a parallel between that case and the case of Jason Mwanza, the Gen Z protester, who held the placard at the Freedom Statue, and then he was arrested and kept without bond or bail for 14 days. On any given day of the week, Crumbs, if you are not biased, you can clearly see that the breakdown in the rule of law is much greater now than it was under the previous administration. We are not saying the police never used to abuse their powers in the previous administration. Of course, they used to. But if you put it on a scale, if the level of abuse of police powers in the PF administration was at 25, the level of abuse under the UPND administration is at 75. So on any given day of the week, if you compare 75 and 25, you can see that we haven't made progress. If anything, things have deteriorated over the years in the time that Hakainde Hichilema has been president of Zambia. So those arguments you are making, they don't carry water. We are not saying PF was a perfect government. They had their own shortcomings.
I'll be honest with
but
you,
the level of shortcomings under the current administration are far higher. That is my argument.
You make it sound like the situation back then was rosy, and what's happening now is
you're twisting my words.
No, that's what you're saying.
No, I'm saying we are not saying that there was no abuse in the previous administration. You are calling it rosy. Me, I'm saying there was abuse, but not this level of abuse. And then you are twisting my words and saying it was rosy. It wasn't rosy. Okay, it wasn't rosy.
Because we're talking about
don't put words in my mouth. You're putting words in my mouth. If I want to say rosy, I'll say rosy. Yes,
there's so many adjectives to describe what
don't put rosy in my mouth when I haven't said rosy. Okay.
When you say if it was 25% in the PF, it's 75 now.
Yes.
Compared to that, wouldn't you say that's a more rosy situation in the previous regime?
It was a better situation, not rosy. Rosy is your words. Rosy is your words. I don't want to borrow it. You keep rosy. You keep rosy. Rosy is your words. Rosy is your words. I don't want to borrow it.
Let's not battle on semantics. We're just talking about how.
But semantics are important. You can't put words. You can't put words which I don't want to say in my mouth. Yeah, sure.
We're talking about what happened during the Patriot Front not being right, and whatever's happening now not being right as well.
Yes.
Can we just call it that?
Without putting it on a scale. It's worse. It's worse.
What happened back then was so bad that the people of Zambia voted out the Patriot. That's how bad it was.
If you are a reasonable person, I'm sure you agree with me that holding, civil society activists who are doing a peaceful protest for 6 hours, or is it 7 hours, from 17 hours to midnight, is a more reasonable scenario, like what happened to me, Lola Miti, Pirato, Mwape, it's a more reasonable scenario than holding a civil society activist like Jason and his 2 colleagues, incarcerating them for 14 days without taking them to court and without giving them bond. Let's agree on that. Wouldn't you say the former is a more reasonable scenario than the latter?
I would just say it was bad then and it shouldn't happen. And that's calling a spade a spade.
Let's move on. We don't have to
That's
agree.
calling a
But
spade
I believe I've made my point to the viewers out there.
And well, if you want to talk about what happened back then, there were youths who were forced to protest in the bush because there was threats of their bones being broken by senior officials.
Something that never happened.
Yeah, but you have threats.
We are not saying that wasn't good, but we don't know why they decided to go to the bush and why. You remember, I used to hold my protest, the fire tender protest, with a wheelbarrow. Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
You do remember that. Do you know how many protests I held? I held a total of 18 protests. One time, I was stopped by the police just when we were starting at Central Police there, because our route for the protest was would start at Central Police and then would come all the way with Church Road, reach the High Court, then come to Addis Ababa and join British Road. That was our standard route. So one time, I think that was during the 14th protest, out of the 18 we did. We were stopped by police officers there after having given them notice. And I said, okay, fine, you've done that. I'll take you to court. I took the Zambia police to the High Court. And that case was adjudicated for, and we won that case. And we were awarded damages and costs, a total of about 450,000 kwacha. So we were able, the justice system was solid. And we could hold the police accountable and get an award. Under the current dispensation, there is a total breakdown in the rule of law. The police are completely compromised. The judiciary is more than 90% compromised. You'll be very lucky if you face a sober judge or magistrate. Most of them are in the pockets of the UPND, in my view. They support the UPND. So the level of breakdown of the rule of law, then, when you compare it with the level of breakdown of the rule of law now, it is far worse now than then. And I just want to emphasize the point that I'm the best person to make this assessment in this country. Me, Sean Tembo, I'm the best person to make this assessment because for me, I was a very, very vocal opposition leader under the PF. Very vocal opposition leader. I challenged the PF on a daily basis. People were afraid to even drive around in a vehicle which is branded. I used to drive around, our vehicles were all branded, our buses were branded PEP. We are not afraid of a PF. So we had a lot of encounters with them, and I'm able to compare the kind of encounters I had with the Patriotic Front, the kind of encounters I had with the police under the Patriotic Front, the kind of encounters I had with the judiciary under the Patriotic Front. I'm able to compare them with the kind of encounters I have now with the UPND, the kind of encounters I have now with UPND police, and the kind of encounters I have now with the UPND judiciary. And I can tell you, Crumbs, confidently, that things got from bad to worse. Things have gotten from bad to worse. And on any given day of the week, I would rather have the PF government back in office than to continue with the UPND government. And that was one of my motivations for joining the Tonse Alliance, so that come 2026, we can retire the UPND government and President Hakainde Hichilema in the national interest.
What will be done differently by President Edgar Lungu in this regard? Because you said it went from bad to worse, meaning there was a bad starting point. I think that's a fair assessment. I'm not putting words in your mouth. What will be done differently in 2026 if former President Edgar Lungu wins?
I interact a lot with the President Edgar Lungu, and we've had this discussion on several occasions, and he admits to the areas where he did not do well. For instance, the issue of controlling cadres. A lot of people did irregularities in the name of the president. But the president was then kind of conflicted because these people are praising you. You understand? They are praising you. They are saying you're a good person. You are their leader. And yet, on the other hand, these same people who are praising you are doing irregularities. You understand? So the president was soft on those cadres. Because on one hand, they were praising him, but on the other hand, they were perpetuating irregularities. And when the president reflects today about the way he handled the issue of cadreism, he regrets. He regrets significantly, and going forward, he has assured me that going forward, when he is sworn in as the 8th president of Zambia, he will ensure that out of any other thing that people might complain about, the issue of cadalism will not be one of them. It will not. That chapter was closed. It's a regrettable chapter. Going forward, it shall never happen again.
Well, let's get to some of the solutions. What do you propose to address Zambia's escalating cost of living, which has been exacerbated by droughts, poor farming input distribution, and fuel price instability? The kwacha is unstable right now. There's projections that it will go down further. What will the Tonse Alliance come to do to just tackle these issues?
Yeah, so when you look at the issue of cost of living, you realize that it is largely because people don't have an income. They don't have an income. They don't have jobs. Their businesses have crumbled. You get the point. That is the reason why the cost of living has gone up. Because if you have money, you will not complain about a loaf of bread selling at 30 kwacha. But if you don't have money, or you have a very small amount of money, then 30 kwacha will be a big amount of money. So, as Tonse Alliance, in terms of our economic turnaround plan, the first thing we are going to implement is to ensure, because I'm sure you agree with me that the majority of the Zambian people are not educated. They are not qualified. They don't have the skills. You understand? Those who are educated, who went to school, are quite few. Maybe those people who spend too much time in towns think that a lot of us, because we're able to speak English, we're educated. The majority of the Zambian people out there in the rural areas, in the compounds, are not educated. So when you want to come up with a plan to empower the people, to provide an income to the people, you have to take that into consideration. Okay. So our plan as Tonse Alliance is to ensure that we create a conducive business environment which will allow those people who want to venture into businesses to be able to thrive. Okay. When someone got, in the previous administration, people were able to send their children to school merely by selling fritters. But they're able to generate an adequate income and send their children to school. So we want to create that necessary conducive environment. So perhaps your question would be, how would you create that conducive environment so that amake chipayeni kumtendere kuja ngati wafuna yamba business ya vitumbua or yama bands or wafuna they want to start a salon, that business will be able to thrive. You need to address the key issues. Stability of power supply is one of them. Liquidity in the economy. Have you ever heard the complaint by a lot of the people, especially in the lower income areas, who say ndalama za vuta mulibe ndalama mu circulation? You understand? From an economic management point of view, the reason there's no money in circulation is twofold. On one hand, because of the high accumulation of domestic debt. On the other hand, because of the high accumulation of domestic arrears. The difference comes, and also for the benefit of the people out there, between domestic arrears and domestic debt is that whereas domestic debt is the money government borrows from the economy using instruments like treasury bills and government bonds, domestic arrears is basically the money that government owes the various suppliers of goods and services. So when you supply, let's say, beans to Chagwa Secondary School and government doesn't pay you, that is added to domestic arrears. And under the Patriotic Front government, they left domestic arrears at about 18 billion kwacha. I used to complain about that in the alternative budgets every time because I felt 18 billion kwacha was too much to owe to the economy. But under the current administration, within 3 years, the new Dawn government have driven domestic arrears from 18 billion in 2021 to about 95 billion at the moment. That's huge. So when you have a government which in any economy in the world is the biggest player, wherever you go in the world, the government is the biggest economic player. When you have the biggest economic player in the economy owing the other small players in the economy a total of 95 billion kwacha, then it means that they are holding on to that liquidity. No one has money. If they begin to liquidate that, you can see activity in the economy. This one gets paid for the rice they supply to a school. They go and pay their rental arrears. Landlord atenga ichandalama and ogulako kachimbo ni pabuchari. uja wa butchery aliko na ndalama aenda kulako malata afuna commercial pinango. So that's how the economy is able to move. So we are going to dismantle domestic areas to allow liquidity in the economy so that even wantu wovutika akamba ka business kali konse, because our people are not lazy. Wama esa nyuma kutachaka. I'm sure you are able to see people selling in a plastic bag. When I'm going to research, they're able to generate 1 kwacha here, 2 kwacha there. We are going to create a necessary conducive environment so that whoever ventures into business is able to thrive and be able to succeed. That will be step number 1. Step number 2 is, of course, the issue of employment creation. But like I said earlier, the issue of employment creation should be pursued bearing in mind that the majority of our citizens are not skilled, and therefore they cannot all be absorbed in the labor market. You need to bear that into mind as you come up with your plan. And the Tonse Alliance is going to do exactly that.
All right, well, let's get the people involved. Call us now, 0974-870-877 for you to be part of this conversation. We have Mr. Sean Tembo. He is Patriots for Economic Progress President, and he is also the spokesperson of the Tonse Alliance. Give us a call now. Can you use these headphones?
Is this one open?
A little bit of a problem, so all right, give us a call now, 0974-870-877. Hello, good morning. Good morning. Who do we have there? Sorry, your line is not too clear. Malama, using earphones or Bluetooth device?
Okay, I have you on loudspeaker, but you're not on loudspeaker now.
Okay, perfect. We can hear you now. Malama, please go ahead. What's your question?
Thank you so much. Mr. Tembo, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Malama.
I appreciate the fact that you are a big objective, but my observation is I think as a leader, try to engage these viewers. We really want to lead them, but stop creating tension when you're being interviewed. Then the other thing is, you know the problem, but to me it sounds like we don't have the solutions yet. Because when you ask about the solutions, you are taking us back to the problem. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Malama, for your call. 0974-870-877. Feel free to give us a call now. Come through to the hot seat. Hello, good morning.
Hello.
Good morning. What's your name?
Yeah, this is Tonse. Good morning, Good morning, Mr. Sean Tembo.
Good morning, sir.
Morning. Please go ahead.
That's why we at the Total Alliance 2026 is to raise up for Mubuteka. I just want to talk about our police and our police. The several kilometers, the man will not put to have the demo. It's a popular wing. I'm only supporting your body. The long way to go, I never was second by this. I'm a motor gate. Where could go to community out? They are the platform to. You single server government was to compensate you. There are other one. I will never want to have more police services. So, who of the Kuruba Kapola. But if I do. But the very congregant we are most of us compensate Yamakata, Yama 5 million, 3 million. Can you say the people of you? At any last, I just want to address the president to exchange of security. We have started our significant the former UPND national chairman, Nicola Tuala Kuti, Kurapuka Tishin, and meet the chairman, the education, controversy, Significant to Kabali, and the expenditure UPND. I think the significant to the session is there, Wadi. That is why Kuno, it was actually when I say to the president, money that you need to have a very specific Africa. I read you.
All right, 0974-870-877. Call us. Hello, good morning. Good morning. What's your name?
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. What's your name?
My name is John.
John, please go ahead.
Mr. Sean, good morning.
Good morning.
I'll actually speak the same, but because I'll be wasting English on you, sir. So, you know, we accept the fact that whatever you are saying is true. But the characters were just too much. In the structure, if you talk about the project PF government was having, Wanasanga even us who are not learned, we are able to see that hapana bukabwala repo. Project yako wati tibabuncha 1 million, for example, 1 million. But I say exaggerate, but I say 2 million. But the project is worth 1 million. So right now, yes, seeing Rama Takuri by the fact that we have peace. Mwanze tulei bombela takuya to one town we are kurumba shinga. If we are making a 500, you are going home with that same 500 quart, and we are feeding our families with the same money. Takuya kurumba kadore is out. Okay, so thank you very much, Mr.
Okay,
Sean.
okay, John, thank you for your call. He said he was member, but used English in the end there. Please, what's your response to Malama Kingfred?
Yeah. Mr. Marama raised a very pertinent issue on the fact that we should avoid, being very argumentative so that we can allow listeners to enjoy the program. But maybe I can explain to Mr. Marama. The reason I object very strongly to the approach of interviewing whereby someone asks you a very leading question, and then which is essentially a statement, and then as you try to respond to it, they cut you off and ask you another statement, not a question, is that there is a certain narrative that is created by that. And I strongly object to any interviewer, wherever I am, creating a narrative as opposed to me creating my own narrative. If I want to say something, I'll say it. I'm not a very shy person. I'm sure everyone who has followed my interviews is able to attest to the fact that I say what is in my mind. I'll say
But
it
that's
out.
not what happened on this platform. You were saying something, and I wanted to correct you on something.
Let's not argue.
Yeah, no, because you're making a statement, and I have to defend what I did.
Okay.
I wasn't putting a narrative. I was just embellishing a point.
So Mr. Manam also raised another point to say that he says that I'm able to outline the problems very clearly, but the solutions are not very clear. Well, I believe that if I was allowed to explain without interruption, my solutions would even be more clear. So
well, you were given a chance, and no one interrupted. I specifically let you speak.
Yeah. So then there's the other gentleman who basically was commenting about the police killings and the fact that there are more police killings under the current administration than under the previous administration. And I believe it was disingenuous of you Combs to only highlight the police killings that took place under the PF and not the killing and harassing of citizens by the police that is happening now. When,
one thing I kept on saying,
let me finish.
It was wrong then, it was wrong now.
Let me finish.
That covers that.
So my view is that, our police have not been behaving well. Not just now, not just yesterday, but for a very long time. And if we are going to hold them accountable, if we are going to compare them to behave in a professional manner, then it needs to be corrected. We shouldn't single out to say this was better than that. Being strapped is better than being punched. Then we are not going to make progress. Let's hold the police accountable so that they behave in a professional manner. That's my response to that.
Can I respond to your assertions that I was being disingenuous? Because you leveled something against me, and I don't agree.
Sure.
The point I was making was you were supporting a candidate who you criticized. And so the things that happened during his regime have to be highlighted. Is that a fair assessment?
That's what I'm good.
We do.
That's what I'm good for.
No one is saying that whatever's happening now is right. That's why I kept on saying whatever happened back then was wrong. And if it's happening now, not even if, because it is, it's wrong.
That's what I'm good. Then he raised the issue of Honorable Stephen Kaputa. He chanted in media and he fought very strongly for the party. To a large extent, I agree. I feel that Honorable Kaputa has not been fairly treated by President Hagan Hichilema. When I was in the opposition alliance, I worked quite closely with the UPND. And Honorable Kaputa was a strong man. The person who was in the trenches and fought very strongly for UPND to get to power. And the fact that he has not been fairly rewarded, I think, is an issue that President Hakainde Hichilema needs to look at. Needs to look at that. Then we have a question, a submission from Mr. John.
John.
Yes, who has admitted that the economy is not doing well and that there's no money in circulation, things are very bad. But he says the issue of cadarism under the PF administration was just too much. He says it's better to suffer in peace than to be harassed by the cadres. I agree with John to a very large extent. Of course, people want their safety, they want their personal security. And that is why, like I said earlier, President Edgar Chagwa does recognize and he has made a very public apology on that issue that he did not do enough to curtail the issue of federalism. And I can give you my personal guarantee, Mr. John, as well as yourself, Franz, that a Tonse Alliance government, people might complain about one or two things, but the issue of federalism will not be one of them.
That's a guarantee.
That's a guarantee. That's a personal guarantee from me to the Zambian people. The issue of federalism will not be one of them. So the issue of federalism is a dead issue. It has been buried. We are going to forge a new direction going forward.
You seem very confident. What will you do differently with that? Because it seems be quite a difficult, it's like a conundrum for a lot of political leaders.
So when you look at the issue of federalism, even under the current administration, it only thrives because the police allow it to happen. And the police will allow it to happen because the political leaders are harassing the police to allow it to happen. You understand? The police themselves don't have appetite for unruly behavior. You understand? But if they are afraid that if anyone is wearing red or during the previous regime wearing green with the portrait of the president on the regalia and they do anything against that person, then they are going to have repercussions. Then they will hesitate. And when the police hesitate to enforce the law fairly, then they create a loophole for more people to misbehave. You understand? So it grows just like that. So in terms of addressing it, like you asked, it's quite simple and straightforward actually. You just need to ensure that you give assurances to the police that they should not hold anybody as sacred. There should be no sacred cows in the enforcement of the law. And when you have an incident whereby the police apprehend someone wearing regalia of the ruling party and the political leaders don't intervene, then the police will grow more confident. You understand? While the police are growing more confident, the cadres will grow more fearful of law enforcement. So they will be behaving themselves. Wherever they go, they will know that, our boss is our protect.
You're in a unique position to comment on this because you're a former police officer. So,
yes.
So, from that perspective, how do cadres find themselves having more power than a police officer? That's something that baffles a lot of people.
I just explained to you. It's about the political leadership intimidating the police to give room to accommodate the misbehavior of those ruling party cadres. When you do that, the police want to protect their jobs. So they will see the misbehavior of the ruling party cadres, but they will not have appetite to do anything about it because they are fearful of their jobs. They are fearful of being given transfers to a very remote rural area. You understand? So if you don't interfere with the operations of the police, provided those operations are done in a fair and equitable manner, if the political leadership does not interfere, then the police will become confident to say, provided I do my job, no one is going to come after me. And then they'll ensure there's law and order across the board, whether cadres or no cadres.
Is there a systematic approach to this? Because it seems it's all about who's in power and how they deal with cadres. But if you do have a system in place that stops cadres from having any sort of power, is that a possibility?
Well, by law, cadres are not entitled to any power over any other citizen. So it's not something that is documented to say the misbehavior of cadres is something that is that is, in any written law or regulation. It's not. You understand? But let me raise one point. When you talk about the law, the rule of law, it is literally impossible to have adequate enough laws to prevent a government which wants to misbehave. Understand? So the maintenance of the rule of law and the appetite to ensure the rule of law prevails has a lot to do with the moral standing of the people that are in office. Because even if you enact a law to amend a previous law today, you'll find that there will always be a loophole. So the question is, the government which is in place, do they want to take advantage of that loophole, or they want to ensure that that loophole is closed? So on any given day of the week, anywhere in the world, there will never be enough laws to prevent a government that wants to misbehave. There will never be.
That's where the moral issue comes in.
Yes.
Give us a call, 0974-870-877. Hello, good morning.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Krom.
Good morning. What's your name?
I'm fine. This is Mlenga, the voice of Wapula. Sean Tembo Mshan.
Tulifeweza wamlenga mlishani.
Awe tulifyo bwiri. Mulina Tonse na ba Edgar Lungu. Sisi wa Sean Tembo ba Edgar Lungu kuba wamina lelo. Tuishinga bali promise obusa mpera ku minister, special advisor, ngani vice president itatuishira. Akapene baleuma abantu ba Edgar Lungu notya bayishirwe gwe batwali b'amakadali kozi ba Edgar Lungu baleera ndati abantu muleera ndati mbafunye mu street ebambikire pampando ba Edgar Lungu automatically 100% balishirya ati amakadali baleuma abantu kyawamana uli omulumende wabwe bati asikali alazi ukwe baleesimina abantu kwe bati kyawama baleejula na PCA points. Jawama basta bread nangu zofine sikepari 200 or 1000 that vale ndo mtende. Kana market vale sio mtende market. Takulia tiova komanda baisa basta sana. Anyway anga mwayapa liponse kana market vale kia. Takuli kwa tiova komanda vale fwa kwa ya lunch takuli nshi. Sisi lola Edgar Lungu lero fuwa wamine. Akapene baba Sean Tembo bale kuma town yonse kuma kadali bale muma member town yonse almost every day iroba Edgar Lungu bawamba Johnson. Thank you.
Lenga Total. 0974-870-877. Give us a call on that line so you can give us your question or contribution. Hello, good morning.
Hello, good morning. How are you?
Well, thanks. How are you?
All right.
Your name,
what I want to ask
sorry, we need your name. We need your name.
Hello?
We need your name.
All right, my name is Ben.
Ben, please go ahead.
All right, okay. Last week in Parliament, the Minister of Mines was asked about the...
Sorry, Ben, if you have us on loudspeaker, just use your mouthpiece. Just put it on your ear, please.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yeah, much better.
All right, what I'm saying is the Minister of Mines was being questioned by the opposition members of Parliament, either the children of Mokani, Mines. And then the answers that he was giving, they were not like clearly to explain how the whole process was and why it was just outside the Parliament. And they also, I also heard that Mr. Mbune Wampunde asking like, no, there's even some names of like individuals on those bills. So I need to hear what Mr. Sean Tembo's comment is over that.
All right, Ben, thank you for your call.
All right, thank you.
0974-870-877. We had a call from Mulenga and Ben. Just one more call, and then we'll allow Mr. Sean Tembo to respond. He is our guest this morning on the hot seat. He is the president of the Patriots for Economic Progress, and he is also from the Tonse Alliance. Call us now. Hello, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Well, thanks. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Thanks, Mr. John.
So you said your name is?
John.
John.
Yes.
Okay, John, your line is not too clear. If you have us on loudspeaker, just use your mouthpiece.
Yeah, no, I'm not. Maybe just a place.
Mr. Tembo, are you able to hear?
Yeah.
Okay, John, please go ahead.
My contribution is that it's not about everyone who supports UPND, not about everyone who's going to support Edgar Chagwa Lungu. Everyone has a choice. So that you can support you, because why you not support you, the choice yake. Why you are so like Zambia? Let's change our mindset. That's why we never divorce in Zambia because of this same issue. Because the jealousy, because the hatred, just allow them to support you. Just allow it to support you. This is yake. Kawala obera mtu anakala obera usiku. Zapanga hapo ndani. Ni utaratibu. Hata usilapola kama mtu muone, at least you able to defend yourself. But uta obera mtu usiku. Zambia. Thank you.
Thanks, John. All right, we had Mulenga, Ben, and John. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I believe the question that Mr. Mulenga had raised was actually answered by the submission by Mr. John, the last caller, when he said that everybody is free to support a candidate of their choice based on their convictions. So from where I stand, Crumbs, like I said, on numerous occasions, I believe that the leadership of President Edgar Chagwa Lungu was by far better than the leadership of Dr. Hakainde Hichilema on any measure of leadership that you consider, whether it is economic management, whether it is rule of law, whether it is justice and equity. ECL was far better than HH. Okay, and I've written several articles, drawing a parallel between different aspects of the two leaders' leadership in office. And our view as Tonse is that, as we approach 2026, we need a candidate who can definitely win us the election. And we don't have any doubt in our mind that Dr. Edgar Chagwa Lungu is that candidate who will ensure that he wins us that election. Okay, and that is some of the reasons why we decided to settle on him as our candidate for 2026. Coming to Mr. Ben on the issue of the sale of Mopani, first of all, I want to mention that the explanations given in Parliament by the Honorable Minister of Mines don't make sense. They don't make sense. And they don't just make sense to people like myself, even to the Speaker herself. That explanation didn't make sense. And that is the reason why the Speaker told the Minister to say, can you give another explanation? If the explanation that the Minister had given at the first instance was sound and reasonable, then there would have been no reason for the Speaker to compel the Minister to give a fresh explanation on the same issue. When you look at the entire transaction of Mopani crops, you realize that the PF administration had gotten Mopani from Grenco. Okay, they got Mopani from Grenco because Grenco had violated certain provisions of the agreement, the investment agreement. So Mopani was sitting with the ZCCM by the time the UPND came into office. Mopani was owned by ZCCM Investment Holdings. In other words, it was owned by the Zambian people. And then it remained dormant because they didn't want to implement the plans that the PF had regarding Mopani, which was to invite various local investors and to float Mopani on the Lusaka Stock Exchange. Those were the initial plans. When the UPND came, they didn't want to proceed with those plans, and the Mopani remained dormant for a prolonged period of time, more than 2 years. Along the way, the UPND decided that they are going to sell Mopani to a foreign investor, the IRH group, okay, through their subsidiary, which is Delta. Okay, and then they sold. But now we've seen that on the shareholding of Mopani, we are seeing certain individuals as opposed to the company where they said they would sell it. That is why now there is suspicion among the Zambian people that Mopani might have been sold to people affiliated with the UPND government. And that is why we want accountability and transparency to explain how individuals found themselves as shareholders on that foreign company. And that explanation is yet to come. What was presented in Parliament by the Honorable Minister of Mines did not make sense. And hopefully, when he provides a second explanation, it will make sense. Because as things stand at the moment, there is a very, very heavy suspicion that Mopani might have been sold to senior government officials. They might have shared Mopani among themselves.
We'll wait for that second explanation. Call us now. Hello, good morning.
Correct. The admin one with Tembo just compound. What is Nicolette? Comrade Tembo, well spoken. I mean, we need such voices in Zambia today because we are passing through a period whereby things are so hard. And as if that were not enough, I mean, you see people start, privatizing national assets themselves. So that's very sad. However, I would like to pick your brains. Over the pastoral letter, we saw that the bishops have refused the hate speech law, saying that no, it is being applied selectively. So, what would be your comment? Regarding the same, because we have seen some people calling the people of Wapula to say that they have got poverty of the mind. Yes, they have not been touched. We have seen people insulting a certain tribe from the northern region. Yes, they are not being investigated. But we have seen some other people from somewhere being arrested. By issuing this, the same tribal remarks. So don't you think that the hate speech law is there to benefit the UPND, as a party? Thank you very much. I submit Apia Mobile.
Thank you for your call. 0974-870-877. Call us now. Hello, good morning.
Honorable Francis Mundentika is one of is calling from the second town. Good morning to you, moderator, and good morning to the showing Tembo this morning.
Very well. How are you, sir?
No, we are fine. Yes, thank you very much. And thank you for your contributions, Lashon Tembo. We need voices that are fearless like you, speaking for the people. It is only up to the government. As a reasonable government, a president that wants to succeed should listen to their veteran Jews like yours. That's the way you're going to survive. That is what built Manawas. President Tata fought vehemently. So all the sensible things that have said Manawas system on board, it helps him shape this nation to another level. So even now, when Lashon Tembo is seated, you should pay attention. It is not that the man is just speaking because he's in opposition or whatever. He's giving you solutions and things that you try to hide under the carpet. You in government, you bring them out in the open. In fact, there are checks and balances. Because running a government doesn't mean you own everything. You're the most intelligent people. Different government. There are other people who are not even politicians. Well educated. They're doctors, they're professors, they're what? But at the end of the day, critically, when people you are with in the government sector per se, the opposition per se, you should pay attention to such people because they are speaking for the voiceless.
Francis, we need you to conclude.
Look at how
we need you to conclude.
Yes, in conclusion, Lashon Tembo, look at how these days there are laws that have been put in place, so you can't criticize the government. Which government criticizes ever in opposition more than what the UPN is doing in opposition? Those are some of the things you should look at, where you're coming from and where you're going. Otherwise, keep up the good work you're doing and let us see how this country will be shaped. So the ruling party, please pay attention to what the people are crying for, not what you think should be done. Thank you.
Let's pick up on more calls. Be our last call before we close. Hello, good morning.
Good morning, Promise.
Good morning. What's your name?
This is Danny.
All right, Danny, please go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Tembo.
Good morning, Mr. Danny.
Yes, Mr. Tembo. It's really surprising that you are now supporting Mr. Lungu, whom you criticized a lot when he was the president. You criticized him for being the one running the brutal regime, having failed to control the economy of this country, having run the lawlessness, political party. And now you are saying he's a changed man, he's saying he's going to not to allow the capitalism. How sure are you that Mr. Lungu is a changed man? And you are the one who is even putting words in his mouth, because the man really has got no any agenda. He made it very clear that he just wants to come back to protect his family. So how then is he going to turn around this economy, which he brought down himself? How is he going to tackle the issues of debt? Because once they even defaulted, they failed to pay back the debt. The Minister of Finance made it very clear. If it was not for the debt restructuring, the 2025 budget was going to be swallowed by the debt.
the government is going to stop even paying the civil servants. So how then the people of Zambia should trust Mr. Lungu? First of all, Kuro, maybe try to invite Mr. Lungu one day so that we ask him questions. What is going to do differently? Because him he says he just want to protect his family, because these people steal a lot from us. So the only agenda is to come and protect the property which they store. Thank you very much.
All right, Danny, thank you for your call. Please, people want your president of your alliance.
Yes, I'll bring him in good time.
All right. Yes, please respond to the calls that we.
Thank you. Yes, we had the first caller. Basically, many issues about the current government privatizing national assets. There are the issues on the pastoral letter, the selective application, the hate speech law. All these are issues which are in the public domain. It just depends on how sober a particular citizen is. Any sober citizen will be able to say that the hate speech law is being applied selectively. Any sober citizen, unless someone is extremely biased, in favor of the ruling party. And also the issues raised in the pastoral letter, these are pertinent issues. The issue of harassment of the church, that has never happened in the history of this country, not to that level where you harass a bishop at his own church. And no apology, nothing whatsoever. The issue of privatizing national assets, Mopani, the plan of the previous administration, the PF administration, was to ensure that Mopani would be in the hands of the Zambian people. And I agree with that approach. If we are truly going to benefit from our mineral resources, we need to have a significant stake in our mines. When you look at countries which have done very well in terms of benefiting from their mineral resources, I always cite the case of Botswana. You'll find that Botswana, their diamonds are being mined by a company called Botswana. That Botswana company is 50% De Beers owned. De Beers is an international diamond company, and 50% owned by the Botswana government. So that ensures that they are able to enjoy the, industry good practice, efficiencies of scale, and so on and so forth through the partnership on one hand. But the nation is also able to benefit in terms of being able to get a portion of the dividends once they are declared. And at the end of the day, the country goes away with more money than the investor. Because before the dividends are declared, let's say they make a profit of 100 million, the government will collect their income tax from that 100 million. There, the income tax rate is a bit lower, it's at 25%. So they'll get 25 million in terms of tax. Then what remains there, 75, they share in the middle. So the international investor gets the 7.5, the government gets the 7.5. When the government adds their 7.5 million to the 25 million which they collected area, they'll end up with about 62.5 million, while the investor goes away with the 7.5 million. Okay, so it works very well. As opposed to a situation whereby you give the mining to international investors 100%, or you own a very minute portion of the share for you to have any influence. Because again, when you are a 50% shareholder as a nation, the issues of tax evasion are prevented, because your people who are sitting on the board have an equal say to the other investors, board members who are sitting on the board.
Is that something you want to do?
Yes, definitely. We'll definitely pursue that as a Council Alliance government, because it will be beneficial to the Zambian people. The moment you are an outsider as a government and you only rely on the taxman to go in every now and then and do a tax audit and so on and so forth, it is not enough. You need to sit on the table where decisions are being made.
Mr. Tembo, I'd like to thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Krams.
It's been a pleasure having you.
It's been a pleasure to be here.
All right. We've had Mr. Sean Tembo here on the hot seat as our guest. He is the Patriot for Economic Progress President and also the spokesperson of the Tonse Alliance. Look out for Thursday's edition